Good evening. Welcome to the National News Broadcast. I'm Kasuni Badachandra.
And I am Tilina Udayaratna. We begin with a look at the headlines for tonight. Another 332 have recovered from COVID-19. The 23rd COVID-19 related death reported. Several police divisions have been isolated. The COVID-19 risk in Minuangoda has reduced. A methodology to issue curfew passes in an expedited manner for factories. Many economic centres will be open from tomorrow. District secretaries and coordination committee chairpersons empowered to take maximum measures to control the pandemic situation. And on your top local story this evening, the Ministry of Health says that the total number of recoveries from the COVID-19 outbreak in the country has increased up to 5,581. Meanwhile, the 22nd and 23rd COVID-19 related deaths in the country were reported today. The final rites of the deceased were carried out at the Borella Cemetery with accordance to the quarantine regulations. The post-mortem report on a 68-year-old deceased woman at a house in Jampata Street in Colombo on the 1st of November has confirmed that she had been contracted with the COVID-19 disease. One of her family members was previously identified as a COVID-19 patient, and subsequently the rest of the family members were directed to self-quarantine. The health authorities have indicated that the closest cause for her death has been stipulated as COVID pneumonia conditions. Accordingly, the Director General of Health Services confirmed that the death as the 22nd COVID-19 related death in the country. The post-mortem report on the death of a 61-year-old deceased woman residing in Colombo 15 has been confirmed as the 23rd COVID-19 related death in the country. The post-mortem report indicated that the cause of her death has been due to a lung infection triggered through COVID-19. Meanwhile, a total of 272 COVID-19 patients were reported from the country today, out of which 269 have been identified as close contacts of the patients detected from the Parliamentary COVID cluster. Another 3 have been identified as individuals from quarantine centres. The Government Medical Officers Association has informed not to hesitate in visiting the hospitals for relevant treatment for the diseases, excluding the patients with COVID-19 symptoms and pregnant mothers. Chief Epidemiologist Dr. Sudat Samaravira has said that the COVID-19 deaths in the country can be identified under 2 categories. Meanwhile, a total of 11,889 PCR tests were carried out in the country yesterday, increasing the total number of PCR tests carried out in the country to 536,337 thus far. A driver of a pharmaceutical production factory in Ratmalana and his son, who is also working at the same factory, have been tested positive for COVID-19. A total of 58 close contacts of the patients, including the drivers and the staff of the factory, have been directed into self-quarantine. PCR tests have been conducted on 300 individuals in Hikkadua and Medical Health Officers Division after detecting 5 COVID-19 patients from the area. 8 shops visited by fisheries technicians reported from Gonapinuwala in Hikkadua have been temporarily closed down. A discussion was held yesterday on the implementation of the measures taken by the government to mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 outbreak in Kaduwala. It was held under the presence of Minister Vimal Veeravansa. B. Brown Sharing Expertise Company has donated a consignment of face masks worth 1 million rupees yesterday. The consignment was handed over to Minister Pavitra Vanyarachi by the Director and Financial Officer of the company, Pradeep Amaravardhana.
Continuing with more local stories, Hemmatagama, Mavanala and Bulat Kohupitiya police divisions in Kegaul district, Giriula police division in Kurunagala district and Valigamur Pradesh Sabha division have been isolated. Accordingly, the police have indicated that the quarantine curfew has been imposed in 114 police divisions and 1 municipal council jurisdiction across the country at present. Meanwhile, wholesale trading in many economic centres will be opened from tomorrow. Four police divisions in Kegaul and Giriulla and Valigamu Pradesh Sabha jurisdiction have been isolated along with strict restrictions on movement. The isolation restrictions came to effect from last night. Meanwhile, Moratuwa Police has taken steps to file court cases against 28 individuals, including trade stall owners, for violating the quarantine curfew and relevant instructions. Many quarantine curfew violations and illegal activities were reported from several areas. Massive crowds were seen near the Colombo District Secretariat to obtain vehicle permits during the quarantine curfew imposed period. Meanwhile, the Gazette notification consists of the name list of the state, semi-government, statutory boards, corporations and private institutions which can use their respective office IDs as curfew passers during the quarantine curfew imposed period has been issued. Narahinpeta, Ratmalana and Bokundari economic centres will be opened for wholesale trading from tomorrow onwards. The functions of the economic centres will be carried out under the special observations of the police, medical health officers and public health inspectors. Wholesale trading operations of the Valisara Economic Centre expected to open from the 9th of this month.
The global confirmed and in the meantime, we'll take a look at the global COVID-19 pandemic situation. The global confirmed COVID-19 cases have risen to more than 46.9 million and the death toll has increased to over 1.206 million at present, while the number of COVID-19 cases in the Americas have made up nearly half of the global total to reach 20.7 million cases. Meanwhile, Europe and Southeast Asia reported more than 11.29 million and 9.3 million cases respectively. The United States has the most confirmed coronavirus cases and the deaths in the world. The country has reported more than 9.2 million cases and nearly 231,562 deaths at present. India and Brazil ranked second and third in the world in terms of caseload, reporting more than 8.26 million and over 5.55 million cases respectively. Brazil reported 179 more deaths from the novel coronavirus, raising the death toll to more than 160,000, while 8,501 new cases were reported in the past 24 hours. The number of new coronavirus cases reported in India in a span of 24 hours dropped to 38,300, while the total recoveries crossed the 7.6 million mark yesterday. The number of active cases remained below the 600,000 mark for the fifth consecutive day in India. As daily new coronavirus cases continue to reach record high numbers from Europe, France and Germany have resorted into partial lockdowns, with England set to follow, while Italy also plans to further tighten restrictions in a bid to halt the spread of the virus. Another 18,950 people in Britain have tested positive, bringing the total number of coronavirus cases in the country to 1.053 million. The coronavirus-related deaths in Britain rose by 136 to nearly 47,000. The figures came as British Prime Minister Boris Johnson defended his decision to impose a month-long lockdown on England starting Thursday, the second of its kind since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. New COVID-19 infections in Germany increased by 12,097 within the past 24 hours to a total of 545,027 as the country entered its second partial lockdown. After infections reached a new record last week, the federal and state governments agreed on far-reaching restrictions, and state governments agreed on far-reaching restrictions including tougher contact restrictions and the closure of restaurants and bars for the month of November. Meanwhile, Russia reported 18,648 new coronavirus cases today, including 5,150 in Moscow, pushing the national tally to 1.673 million since the pandemic began. Authorities have indicated that 355 people had died in the last 24 hours, taking the death toll to 28,828 in Russia. France, currently under a 4-week second national lockdown, reported 52,580 new COVID-19 infections yesterday, setting a new daily record since the outbreak of the disease, lifting the country's caseload to 1.466 million. The number of people in France who have died from COVID-19 infections has risen by 416 to 37,435. In the meantime, the French government is set to reimpose an evening curfew on Paris and possibly the Île-de-France region around the capital to tackle worsening COVID-19 figures. Saudi Arabian state oil group Aramco reported a 44.6% drop in third-quarter net profit today, in line with analysts' estimates, dented by lower crude oil prices and volumes sold as the corona crisis choked demand. Weaker refining and chemical margins have also hit the company's net profit, which fell to $11.79 billion for the quarter ending on the 30th of September.
The World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said that a recent spike in COVID-19 cases in several countries in Europe and North America presented leaders with a critical moment for action. Meanwhile, the WHO technical lead for COVID-19, Maria Van Kerkhove, said the latest spike in infections was stretching health services. They made these comments while addressing a media conference held in Geneva, Switzerland yesterday. The chief of the World Health Organization participated in the press conference via a video link.
While many countries have brought COVID-19 under control, cases in some countries in Europe and North America continue to spike. This is another critical moment for action, another critical moment for leaders to step up, and another critical moment for people to come together for a common purpose. Seize the opportunity. It's not too late. We all have a role to play in suppressing transmission, and we have seen across the world that it's possible.
So yes, we support the idea of protest and the idea of speaking out, and we understand people's frustrations. But governments in Europe in particular at this time are facing a very, very difficult situation. You can argue how we've got into this situation, but you can't argue that the situation is serious. We need to push this virus down. We need to take the heat out of this epidemic right now in Europe. And governments have limited options right now in how to do that. Their options are limited. Their options may get easier if we get some success, but right now governments face very limited options.
I think one of the challenges that we're seeing across North America and across Europe is that the increases in cases, the increases in hospitalization, the increases in ICU are happening at the same time. In the spring, there was some staggering of this increase, but it's happening in many countries at the same time, where many systems are becoming overwhelmed at the same time. So that poses challenges for countries that were able to move facilities and move workforce around to help manage the most intense areas.
The WHO technical lead for COVID-19 also said that no clusters have been reported in the WHO premises following the self-isolation of the WHO chief after being exposed to a COVID-19 patient.
Contact of someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. I am well and without symptoms, but will self-quarantine in the coming days in line with WHO protocols. At this time, it's critically important that we all comply with health guidance. This is how we will break chains of transmission, suppress the virus, and protect health systems.
We're all everyday people as well, and we live in homes and apartments, and we have to grocery shop, and we have to take our kids to the doctors and all of that. So everything that we have put in place, everything that we are recommending to the world, we are putting in place here as well. We are tracking all of the cases that are happening amongst staff, doing contact tracing forward, doing contact tracing backwards to make sure we understand how people were infected. And making sure that transmission is not taking place. We haven't had any transmission take place on the premises. We have no clusters on the premises, but it is something we're monitoring every day.
Now then, things are heating up as Americans are voting in one of the most divisive presidential elections in decades, pitting incumbent Republican Donald Trump against his Democratic challenger Joe Biden. Millions of Americans headed to the polls in person today, adding their ballots to more than 99 million already cast by early voters. US President Donald Trump is seeking to avoid becoming the first incumbent president to lose a re-election fight since George H.W. Bush in 1992. National polls have shown that Democratic candidate Joe Biden with a broad lead, but the race is close in key battleground states needed to win the presidency. Record early voting has been fueled by the pandemic, and the US is on course for its highest electoral turnout in more than a century. Elections came after America's worst ever week for new coronavirus cases, with more than 1,000 people dying each day. The first polls opened in Vermont today. Nearly 100 million people have already cast their ballots in early voting, putting the country on course for its highest turnout in a century. Both rivals spent the final hours of the race rallying in key swing states. In the US election, voters decide state-level contests rather than an overall single national one. To be elected president, a candidate must win at least 270 votes in what is called the Electoral College. Each US state obtains a certain number of votes, partly based on its population, and there are a total of 538 up for grabs. The coronavirus pandemic has hung over the election campaign, with the epidemic in the US worsening over the final weeks of the race. The country has recorded more cases and more deaths than anywhere else in the country, and the fear of infection has contributed to an unprecedented surge in early and postal voting.
The program to provide a parcel of dry rations amounting to 10,000 rupees for the families under quarantine is currently underway on district level. The program was initiated with the instructions of the President and the Prime Minister following a meeting held under the patronage of Head of Presidential Task Force on Economic Revival and Poverty Eradication, Basil Rajapaksa. Parcels each worth 10,000 rupees were distributed to 1,680 families in Valisaripura, Pragatipura and Rahulapura belonging to Pragatipura Grama Seva Division of Maharagama Divisional Secretariat Division, which have been declared as isolated areas due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It was held under the presence of Colombo District Secretary Pradeep Yazaratna and Senior DIG in charge of Western Province Deshabandhu Tennakon. Meanwhile, steps have been taken to provide dry ration parcels, each worth 5,000 rupees on 2 occasions, sufficient for 14 days for each family undergoing quarantine process. This will be initiated under the supervision of district secretaries or divisional secretaries. Accordingly, relief packages including dry rations were distributed for quarantining families in Kalutara, Kurunagala, Pannala, Malabe, Kolonnava, Aliyagura and Gampa areas.
Cabinet spokesman and Minister of Mass Media Kehelia Ramukwalas says that the media personnel fulfilled their responsibilities immensely to defeat the outbreak of COVID-19. Issuing a statement, the minister said that the duties and responsibilities fulfilled by many of the media personnel risking their lives during these national disaster situations are in fact immense. The minister has issued the statement appreciating the duties fulfilled by media personnel in the country before the prevailing COVID-19 outbreak situation. Keeping professionalism aside, Sri Lankan media personnel have carried out a national duty at the face of disasters experienced by the country in the recent past. The knowledge, information with understanding, as well as messages extended by the media personnel strongly contributed in defeating the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected the country within the first first quarter of the year. The statement has indicated that the country is facing a similar challenge at present. In his statement, Minister Keheliya Rambukwala has extended his gratitude to the media personnel who have rendered their service at this juncture in fulfilling a national duty. The statement further indicated that necessary steps will be taken by the Ministry of Mass Media to extend a proper recognition for the duties fulfilled by media personnel.
Minister of Fisheries Douglas Devananda has been appointed as the Prime Minister's representative at the Parliamentary Council. Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardene approved the proposal submitted by the Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa in this regard yesterday. The Parliamentary Council consists of the Prime Minister, the Speaker, the Opposition Leader, a representative appointed by the Prime Minister and a representative appointed by the Opposition Leader. Minister Douglas Devananda, who was elected to Parliament from Jaffna district at this year's general election, is a Cabinet Minister as well as the leader of the Elam People's Democratic Party. Holding the membership of Parliamentary Select Committee, Committee on Parliamentary Proceedings and the Committee on High Posts, Minister Devananda also holds the chairmanship of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Fisheries Affairs. Minister Douglas Devananda also holds the co-chairmanship of the Kilinochchi District Coordination Committee. Meanwhile, former Chief Justice Mohan Peiris has been appointed as the permanent representative and ambassador of Sri Lanka to the United Nations. The Parliamentary Committee on High Posts approved this posting today. Former Chief Justice Mohan Peiris was summoned before the Parliamentary Committee on High Posts chaired by Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abeyewardene today. His posting as the permanent representative and ambassador of Sri Lanka to the United Nations was approved following the review conducted by the committee. Ministers Dinesh Gunawardena, Johnston Fernando, Douglas Devananda and Keheliya Rambukwala and MPs Rishad Badiuddin and Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca were also present at this occasion.
Well, with that, let's take a look at some of the cabinet decisions taken at the meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers yesterday. The Cabinet of Ministers has granted approval for the proposal presented by Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa to provide locally manufactured saris as uniforms for Dhamma school teachers for this year. Accordingly, a total of 76,000 locally manufactured saris is expected to be purchased from Lanka Salusala for 182.4 million rupees at a cost of 2,400 rupees each. The Cabinet of Ministers agreed upon the resolution submitted by the Minister of Education, Professor G.L. Peiris, for the implementation of a series of educational programs with the assistance of government and private television and broadcasting networks. The Cabinet of Ministers has given their consent earlier for utilizing both Channel I and Netra for the continuation of teaching activities through telecasting and broadcasting media under the distant education methodology, considering the inconveniences erupted for the continuation of teaching activities in schools due to the prevailing outbreak of COVID-19 in the country. It has been designed to broadcast television educational programs from grades 3 to 13 in all three languages of Sinhala, Tamil and English. The Cabinet of Ministers has given their consent for the proposal presented by Minister C.B. Ratnayaka to have railway sleepers removed from the railways of the Sri Lanka Railway Department for affixing the electric fence and to secure the fence to minimize the elephant-human conflict. Approximately 4,500 kilometers of the electric fence has already been put up in 133 divisional secretariat divisions in 19 districts, while plans have been made to construct another 1,500 kilometers of an electric fence and to secure fences along with the elephant retention centers. The Cabinet of Ministers has granted approval for the proposal presented by Minister Mahindananda Lutgamage to establish a methodology including the National Fertilizer Secretariat with modern technology, improving existing laboratories and a field inspection mechanism to be established with the Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology. Under the new methodology, the district-level operating and evaluation system is to be strengthened, while infrastructure with scientific standards and components based on an automated centralized methodology upon the instructions of the Information and Communication Technology Agency is to be developed. The Cabinet of Ministers has also approved the proposal presented by Minister Dr. Ramesh Patirana to reactivate the Spices and Allied Products Marketing Board and continue its activities. The Spices and Allied Products Marketing Board was established under Section 2 of the State Agricultural Cooperation Act number 11 of 1972. However, the institution was closed down from July 27, 2008 upon a cabinet decision. Meanwhile, the Cabinet of Ministers conceptually approved the resolution furnished by Minister Bandulu Gunawardena for the implementation of the proposed National Export Production Villages Programme, utilizing the required allocations from the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, subject to the guidance of the Ministry of Trade. The implementation of the Export Production Villages Programme has been planned to develop rural productions within a formal enterprises model and link with the export supply chain while upgrading the local production industries as import replacements covering agriculture, fisheries, mechanical and service sectors. The Cabinet of Ministers rendered approval to the proposal furnished by Minister Vimal Veeravansa for the obtaining of shell cases and disposed armour plates from the Sri Lanka military outside the formal procurement procedure, but subject to the price matrix approved by the Cabinet of Ministers in 2017 to the National Crafts Council, and obtain discarded metals from state institutions under concessionary prices to the National Council. Plans have been made to supply raw material in empowering traditional craftsmanship industries and rural sectors on a concessionary basis, enabling their products to compete with imported goods. The Cabinet of Ministers approved the proposal presented by the Minister of Power to initiate a new feasibility study to determine the scope, technical, operational and financial feasibility for the project to expand the capacity at the refinery of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation up to 100,000 BPL SPD, which is to be implemented with a focus on several alternative proposals to enhance the existing capacity.
The Sri Lanka Navy, the police, volunteer groups and residents have successfully managed to push back more than 100 whales stranded in the Panadura coastal region. Only 4 pilot whales have died from the mass beaching. A pod of over 100 whales washed ashore to the coastal line between Panadura and Wadua last evening. A small-sized whale species known as short-finned pilot whale encountered this tragedy. In general terminology of the country, these species are also known as Mukkuru Komadua and Kalumaha. Short-finned pilot whales has a worldwide distribution with a global population of about 700,000, and distinct populations of the species remain in tropical and temperate oceans in the Pacific, the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. A well-grown pilot whale, which is stockier than other species of whales, is about 15 to 20 feet in length and 3,000 kilograms of weight. The short-finned pilot whale has been reported as being highly playful and social. It typically travels in pods of 10 to 30 members, typically family, but has been observed moving in groups of several hundred. The pilot whales face the threats of mass stranding on beaches, mainly due to navigational errors caused by several reasons.
The reason why it happens, we can only make assumptions. So one of the big assumptions is that these are animals that are very social. They hang around in family groups. They'll move around the coastlines. Sometimes if they get too close to the coastline, too close to a wave break where there are waves crashing and pushing them onto the beach, if they get caught in that, they get pushed into the shallows, and that makes it a little difficult for them. So what you see here is, if you can see over my shoulder, you can see that there's lots of waves breaking continuously. So for the animals to go back out, it's like being on a treadmill. They keep swimming out, they get pushed back. Over time they get tired, sometimes they're not successful at making it out.
A large-scale rescue operation was initiated since last evening to drag the pilot whale stranded in the Panadura coastline back to the ocean. The attempt, initiated by the residents in the area to rescue the sea mammals, was backed by the Sri Lanka Navy, the police, volunteer lifeguard groups and Coast Guard Department. 2 vessels belonging to Coast Guard and Lifeguard, 2 rapid action vessels of the Sri Lanka Navy and a jet ski were utilized for the rescue operations. The rescuers were able to push back all the stranded whales to the ocean at about midnight yesterday. State Minister Kanchana Wijesekara was also present at this occasion. However, 4 pilot whales were not able to survive from the beach massing incident. Carcasses of the 4 dead whales were remained in the Panadura and Wadua coastline. Meanwhile, the carcasses of the dead pilot whales were directed to a scientific examination this evening with the participation of the Department of Wildlife and National Aquatic Resources Research and Development Agency. Many incidents of beach massings of pilot whales have been reported across the world. An estimated 460 pilot whales were beached along the shore and 2 sandbars on the western coast of Tasmania in last September, and only 111 of them were able to rescue.
These animals normally they depending on the Earth's magnetic field for their migration and for their locomotion. If there's any change happen to this Earth's magnetic field, that also ultimately affect their migration, and in that case they end up in our coast and get stranded. The second phenomena is that sometimes they are very socialized animals. They tend to be in single family groups. If one animal gets stranded, in this case, others also come to the surrounding area and don't leave that individual, and ultimately the whole family and whole group perish. These animals use echolocation. They use sound for their migration and sound to locate their food or again locate obstacles. When we use high frequency sounds in sonar and radar in underwater exploration and underwater activities and even shipping activities, those high frequency sound can damage those animals, and they are sound capturing organs and sound emitting organs. Ultimately they become very helpless finding their ways and their routes. Then ultimately they end up in coastal waters and they perish.
It is significant that Sri Lankans were able to rescue the majority of the pilot whales from the beach massing, even though the country possesses less lifeguard facilities compared to a developed nation.
Welcome back to the news, and we have more news here at home. Head of the Presidential Task Force on Economic Revival and Poverty Eradication, Basil Rajapaksa, says that the government has been taking all necessary measures to maintain the public life in an absolutely normalized manner and to sustain the economy at a higher level while controlling the spread of COVID-19 in the country. He made these remarks while taking part in meetings held at Temple Trees yesterday and today. Accordingly, District Coordination Committee chairpersons were empowered to take necessary decisions to continuously maintain the public life and the economic conditions, as well as to take measures to protect their respective districts. The head of the Presidential Task Force, Basil Rajapaksa, further said that the government is in the process of taking necessary decisions to mitigate the outbreak while achieving economic objectives and fulfilling the needs of the public without imposing an island-wide curfew at the time when the leading countries in the world have imposed restrictions on movement before COVID-19. It was emphasized that agriculture and other industries should be maintained in a manner to safeguard the producers as well as the consumers. The head of the Presidential Task Force instructed the district secretaries to take necessary measures for the continuous distribution of essential services and utility requirements, including health, transportation, fisheries affairs, management of industries, water and electricity supply, waste management and fuel supply on district level. And in the meantime, the construction of the second phase of the housing complex in Appalwatta, Maligavatta initiated today. The project has been carried out under the instructions of the President and the Prime Minister. The first phase of the multi-storied housing complex constructed in a 12-acre land plot was the Metsanda 7 housing complex. The housing units constructed under the second phase of the project in accordance with the Vision of Prosperity policy statement will be extended for the families residing in less facilitated settlements. A total of 700 housing units is expected to be constructed under this phase, with each unit expected to be around 550 square feet. The government has also allocated 4,000 million rupees for the project, and the Asian Infrastructure Facilities Investment Bank is set to provide the necessary loan assistance for the project. The initiative is expected to be completed within a period of 2.5 years. The construction of the second phase was begun with the participation of State Minister Dr. Nalaka Gudaheva.
The Ratana Sutra has been recited in temples across the country to invoke blessings on the country and to wish good health for the people around the world in the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The recitation of the Ratana Sutra was conducted at the historical Somavati sacred site yesterday. Bhikkhus of the temples in the area, led by trustee of the Somavati sacred site, Venerable Pahamune Subangala Thera, conducted the recital. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa requested the Mahasangha recently to recite the Ratana Sutra, centering all temples in the country, extending blessings to all people. Recitation of the Ratana Sutra was conducted at the Asgiri Mahavihara Pirivanaya premises yesterday under the guidance of the Pirivanadipati of the Asgiri Mahavihara Pirivanaya, Venerable Narampanave Ananda Thera. Another recitation of the Ratana Sutra was held yesterday at the Atkandaraj Mahavihara. The recitation will be conducted throughout a period of 1 week. A mobile Pirit chanting chariot travelled in Yakkalamulla, Telambura and Makumra areas recently. It was organized by the Gaul Thalangaha youth.
The preparation of the Katina robe, which is to be offered at the state Katina Puja ceremony set to take place in the historic Somavati sacred site, has been completed by 50%. In accordance to ancient tradition prevails since the times of the kings, a Katina robe made specially out of cotton thread is customarily offered to the Mahasangha. Recalling the history, the villagers in Nadarigiri Bisopura area engage in the preparation of Katina robe at present using hand loom machines. A single-piece robe is scheduled to be taken to Somavati's sacred site in a procession on the 7th. During the state Katina Puja ceremony, the robe will be offered to the Buddhist monks under the guidance of Chief Incumbent of Somavati Rajamahavihara, Venerable Pahamune Sri Sumangala Thera, and on the following day the sacred robe will be dipped in pandu color by using local raw materials.
Well, that's it from the Rupavahini news desk for tonight. Join us once again tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, take care, good night.
Good night.